Have you heard of Olivia, the travel company for lesbians and LGBTQ plus women? You know what they say. Those who wish to sing always find a song. And when you're a lesbian or LGBTQ plus woman, you want to be able to go on vacation, have some laughs, and be your unique self. Olivia Travel creates full takeovers of their cruise, resort, riverboat, and adventure vacations. And they program every trip with comedians and musicians from our community. You'll laugh, you'll cry, you'll have the time of your life. Discover Olivia for yourself at olivia.com or through the link in our show notes and save $100 on your next Olivia booking when you use promo code CRUISING.
My friends and I, we would want to go out and watch women's sports games. And it was constantly a battle. You know, every time we went to a sports bar, it was like the game would never be on. The game we wanted to watch was never on.
This is Jenny Nguyen, describing an experience that's all too common for women's sports fans.
And so it was always like flagging somebody down, asking them. And sometimes they were like, oh, absolutely. And then sometimes they were like, oh, too many people are watching this particular game. Sorry, we can't do it. And then you're kind of stuck there with like a beer and appetizers or whatever.
Jenny is the founder and owner of The Sports Bra, the country's first women's sports bar. But she started out a disgruntled sports fan.
I feel like my experience with that is very universal for anyone who has been a women's sports fan trying to watch sports out in like general public.
Jenny remembers a particularly impactful incident for her back in 2018.
Probably a dozen of us went to go to a local sports bar here in town. And we roll in there for the NCAA Women's Basketball Championship. It's like the biggest game of the year. And we get in there, and I don't think there's really anything else going on. I think there was like a regular season baseball game maybe that was on. This place had probably 30 or 32 TVs. None of them had the game on. So we were like, and it was kind of empty in there. So we were like, hey, is it okay if we turn the championship game on? They're like, absolutely. So we put all these tables together and we proceeded to have like a really great time. But the TV that they had us on was like kind of in the corner of this bar, and it was like the smaller of all the TVs in there. And the game ended up being like this ridiculously awesome comeback from behind. I think it was like 23 points down. Came back from behind, and there was like 3 seconds left. The game was tied, and they inbound the ball. And Enrique gets the ball, takes one dribble, and shoots it up. And right at the buzzer, it goes in. Our entire table like goes nuts. We like jump up and down. We're screaming. And I remember taking off my hat and like throwing it across the bar in excitement. And then as I did that, I realized I looked out across the bar and no one else was celebrating with us. They were looking at us like we're nuts, right? And I was just like, oh, that makes sense. Nobody else is watching this game. We're the only ones watching this game. So we just celebrated. We high-fived and everything. And then as we were leaving, we were all in the parking lot just talking about what a great game it was and like hugging each other goodbye and everything. And I told my friend, I was just like, oh my God, that game was incredible. And she was like, yeah, it would have been better if the sound had been on. And I think right at that moment, because I hadn't noticed that we had watched the whole game without sound, you know, I was just so shocked that I had gotten so used to watching women's sports in a way that was completely compromised, that something as big as not having sound on, I didn't notice anymore. And that to me was like shocking. And so right at that moment, I was just like, oh my God. And then I said, you know, the only way we're ever going to have the opportunity to watch women's sports in its full glory is if we had our own place. And I totally said it out of frustration. I didn't mean anything by it. This was in 2018. You know, we all laughed about it. And then I was driving home and I was like, ugh, if we had our own place, what would I call it? And I'm kind of like one of those people where every time I see a color that I like, I'm like, ooh, what would I call that color? You know, like I just love like naming things or wordplay or puns and that kind of stuff. And the very first thing that came to mind was the sports bra. And once I like thought it, I was like, oh, that's it. You know, like all we are doing is you're taking a traditional sports bar and you're changing the channel. So all I'm doing is taking the word sports bar and changing 2 letters. And that was it. For years, it was like an inside joke between my friends and I, mostly my girlfriend and I. And it was basically out of frustration. We'd say like, oh, at the sports bra, this game would be on. Or, oh, at the sports bra, you know, the women's bathroom would be clean. Or, oh, at the sports bra, they'd have gluten-free buns, you know, like that kind of thing. Whatever we were frustrated with, because it was constant. There seemed to be a lot of holes in traditional sports bars that weren't being filled because people were just fine with the status quo. It'd been working for 30 years. Why change it?
This is Cruising, a podcast about the last lesbian bars in the U.S. My name is Sarah Gabrielli, and this season we're taking you to lesbian bars, past and present. This is the Sports Bra.
Women athletes have categorically had fewer resources, less funding, less access, less teams to play on, less support, less sponsorship, less everything.
This is Jen Barnes, owner of a sports bar called Rough and Tumble in Seattle, Washington.
The barriers that women athletes have had to surpass, overcome, etc., in order to become the incredible competitors that they are, generally outpace and exceed most men players.
But you would never know this out at your typical male-dominated sports bar.
What's out there in real life is not well represented on TV screens right now. And it's only 3% or 4% of all sports media time is dedicated to women's sports. So that means 97% of all sports media time, whether it's in print or online or on cable, is just men's sports.
But things are starting to change, and the sports bra is part of that change.
Okay.
All right, show me around.
Okay. Let's start at the front door.
Before you walk through the front door, you can tell it's not your ordinary sports bar. For one, their logo, which obviously is a sports bra, is printed on a sign that hangs above the door and on the large windows of the bar. And then there's the door itself, collaged with photos of star players, who are, of course, all women. We meet Jenny inside at 8 a.m., 3 hours before opening. When we arrive, she's buzzing around the bar and kitchen because, in addition to being the founder and owner, Jenny is also the chef. The sports bra boasts a full menu. It's a fusion between traditional American sports bar eats and Jenny's Vietnamese heritage. They serve Aunt Tina's Vietnam wings over a cabbage slaw and Mom's baby back ribs, Vietnamese-style clay pot pork ribs. Jenny's family is a big presence at the sports bra.
So my mom is here every day.
Wait, can
every
we
day.
interview her?
Oh my God, you can. You can. It might need to be heavily edited. Yeah, she'll definitely be in today. And then my dad comes in about once a week to do like knickknacks, like fix things. And yeah, it's pretty rad.
Today, Jenny's parents are a fixture at the bar, but they haven't always been on board with it.
My parents were adamantly against it. They did not want this to happen. 0 amounts. And it was 100% fear-based.
Very scary. And I'm very much doubtful because nobody ever done that before.
This is Jenny's mom, too.
Also, she's a woman. She's Asian minority and she's gay. So it's so many scary things in this world that I'm afraid that it work against her. At the same time, I just want to save for her. Yeah.
You worry about her?
I do because she's my only one.
I'm an only child of Vietnamese immigrants. And so it wasn't that they thought it was a bad idea. They just thought it was so risky and they didn't want me to put everything into it and lose it all. They wanted me to be a doctor or an engineer or a dentist or like one of those things, So I'm 42 years old and I've had a lot of moments in my life where I came to my parents with something big and they absolutely hated it.
Jenny's parents had both immigrated from Vietnam as teenagers in 1975.
My family got sponsored to St. Cloud, Minnesota, which is very cold.
In Minnesota, Tu met Jenny's dad, Thuong. They married and moved to Portland for, believe it or not, the weather.
I come from a very hot weather, tropical country, so it was really, really hard.
They wanted to get out of the Minnesota cold.
It was so below zero over there, but my brother-in-law had some friend already moved here to Portland. They told us, oh, you know what? American, they say young men go west. So my brother-in-law follow his friend. And he said, oh my God, he called us. As soon as he got down to the airport, he called my husband and he said, oh, guess what? They don't wear coat over here. So I said, oh my God, it's so nice weather. You have to move here. So not long after that, we follow him here to Portland.
And not long after that, Jenny was born. Tu and Thuong both worked multiple jobs to give Jenny the best life possible in Portland, and eventually to put her in a good school.
In my family, we always appreciate education because that's how you help the society when you grow up and get out of school, get out of college with a good job, and then you help to make the world better with what your education is about. It's always have been a thing in our family. I have 3 brothers, they're all engineer, and my 2 sisters, one is engineer and one is a doctor. I am the oldest, and when I come here, I already 17 years old. So English is a second language and it's harder for me. So I went to school for 2 years and then I go to work. Yeah, so I'm the only one that don't have a college degree.
Tu worked as a bank teller. She also did loan processing and cleaned houses. Meanwhile, Jenny's dad, Thuong, worked as a handyman and for the city as a wastewater treatment engineer. And as a result, they were able to put Jenny in a nice Catholic school.
My family was super poor and nobody knew that because it's a private school. So, a lot of the kids had money, but we all had uniforms too. So nobody could tell. And so that was my own insecurity.
One way Jenny coped with this insecurity was by playing basketball.
Oh my gosh. Basketball, I would say, was like my identity for a long time. It would probably be the first thing everybody would describe me as, like, oh, Jenny? Oh yeah, the basketball player. You know what I mean? And so by playing basketball, I became popular and people wanted to be my friend because I was an athlete or whatever. And basketball became a way to fit in and a way to feel safe. Because it was like once you stepped onto the court, nothing else mattered. It didn't matter if your parents made a ton of money, what you looked like. It was just like, could you ball out? And that was it. So I would say I was pretty popular. And I think basketball had a lot to do with it. And it was like a crutch.
Jenny had first discovered basketball in grade school.
I started to play basketball at recess. And I remember very vividly playing with just all boys, which was fine. And the girls would run up and dare each other to kiss me on the cheek. That was a thing. And it was funny. And nobody thought it was weird. It was like a game.
By high school, this kind of thing was no longer just a game to Jenny.
People would be like, Jenny, why don't you have a boyfriend? I'd be like, oh, I'm too busy playing basketball. It was always a great excuse to, yeah.
It's the most obvious. I'm too busy playing basketball.
But of course, there was another reason Jenny didn't have a boyfriend. At 17, she secretly started dating someone for the first time, a girl.
And I was so afraid of getting caught. So afraid of getting caught. And I remember going to bed one night and being like, I'm going to tell my parents tonight. And I basically picked a time. I said, okay, 11:20 at night. And I had this little Sony radio clock next to my bed with the digital numbers and the blinking colon. And I was like, okay, at 11:20, I'm going to get out of bed. I'm going to walk upstairs. I'm going to tell my parents. And I just made my mind up. I think it was 11:15 at that time. And so basically I spent the next 5 minutes just staring at that blinking colon and just getting sweaty. And then it turned to 11:20 and I got out of bed. I walked up the stairs. I opened the door. I sat on the edge of the bed and I told my parents that I had something I wanted to tell them. And they were like, okay. And then I started crying real hard. And then I told them that I was gay. And my dad was like, we'll love you no matter what. We just want you to be happy and we want you to be safe. And my mom was like, are you sure it's not just a phase? And the whole thing. And that's basically what happened.
This was the first, but not the last time Jenny would come to her parents with big, scary news. It would take her mom nearly a decade to come around and accept Jenny's identity. During that time, Jenny was recruited to play basketball for a community college in Vancouver, where she received a small scholarship. In Jenny's mind, she was on track to play basketball professionally. But then,
about 2 weeks before my first game, I blew out my ACL in just a scrimmage, open gym practice. And it was, I mean, if I say it was devastating, like that's a gross understatement. Like I had wrapped my entire identity. I was 19 years old. I had no plan for college. I wanted to play basketball. I imagined playing in the NBA. You know what I mean? Like I imagined being the first woman in the NBA. It was ridiculous.
Jenny was only really in Vancouver to play basketball, so she ended up transferring to Washington State.
I didn't know what I wanted to do because I'd only ever thought about playing basketball. And so I got up there and I was like, I guess I'll be pre-med. And then the food up at the school was really bad. And I got really disillusioned by how the cafeteria food was bad. So I started to cook in the kitchen. My dorm room shared a wall with the dorm kitchen. And so I started to cook food on my own. And I started with like my mom's recipes, trying to like make the food that I missed from home. And then I realized that my mom cooked every day and we ate dinner every day at a table, which I didn't realize was not common. So I was missing a lot of things and still super depressed. But then I realized that cooking was just like basketball to me, where like when I'm on a court, everything disappears. Like I was in it, like hours would disappear and I was like in my happy place. And I found that in the kitchen too. And so I started dating this girl and she was just like, God, I've never seen you so happy as when you're cooking or when you're playing basketball. She was like, I don't think you should be pre-med. She was just like, I think you should be a chef. And I was like, there's no way. My parents will murder me. So she tells me that. And I'm like, you're right. You're right. And so I call up my parents one day and they are just, they hate it. They hate everything about it. They basically were like, we didn't flee a war-torn country on a boat and like almost die for you to be a servant to somebody, because to them a chef was like the help.
Big scary news number 2.
Which was really hard for us because we thought that's not a very good career, you know, especially for a gay person like her. Just so much worry, you know, that because she is different.
And then basically I made this deal with my dad. He offered me advice. He goes, why don't you get the worst job you can think of in your field, do it for a year. And if you still love it, go for it.
He probably hoped this would change Jenny's mind about becoming a chef. But regardless, it ended up being good advice.
I got the worst job I could think of. It was called the fryer boy position at the local Red Robin. I was working at an ice cream shop down the hill from my dorm. And one of the girls that I was working with worked at the Red Robin as a cook. And I had told her that I wanted like an entry-level job. And she was like, well, there's this position at Red Robin where she was working that nobody ever stayed at because it was awful. She's like, it's like a rotating door. People just come, they get trained, and then they leave. I was like, great, what is it? Where do I sign? And she was like, you're nuts. But the fryer boy position was basically there's 6 fryers and they each have 2 baskets and there's no tickets that you see. Everything is verbal. And it's the only Red Robin in the college town at the only mall in a college town. So it was mayhem in there. It was absolutely bonkers busy. There's a hot side and a cold side. There's 4 people on each side. And each side has fried items. And so when the ticket comes in, they'll yell it. And so there's a lot of memorization. There's a lot of fast-paced everything. There's no timers, nothing. So you're kind of like dropping baskets and doing all the things. And then you do that all day long. And at the end of every night, you clean out all the fryers as well, which requires a lot of heavy lifting, dumping, scraping, getting in there, burning yourself, all the things. And it was awful. And I loved it.
While she worked at Red Robin, Jenny was still in school.
My mom was like, you have to graduate college and you can do whatever you want.
But once she decided to pursue cooking for real, Jenny switched her major from pre-med to psychology, something a little more broad.
So I graduate college and I immediately enroll in culinary school here in downtown Portland. And I move back. And while I go to culinary school, I work at a couple fine dining restaurants in town. And then when I graduated culinary school, I started working full-time at one of those places that I had been working at already.
While Jenny learned a lot at this job, it was not the healthiest of environments for her.
I developed a really nasty drinking habit. It got real bad. I was probably drinking anywhere between 8 to 15 drinks a night. And I didn't want to talk to anybody until I had a drink. That kind of thing.
It wasn't sustainable For Jenny's health or for her relationship?
My girlfriend at the time, she basically gave me an ultimatum. She was just like, Jenny, either the job goes or I go. And she said that I was an alcoholic and a workaholic. I loved her. So I eventually quit working at that restaurant. And I got a day job, which helped a lot. But it only meant that I had to wake up really early. So I'd have to be less drunk in the morning. But that kind of forced me to temper down. I mean, more or less. I mean, I still drank a lot. I was 22 when I started like working here in town. It's hard. It's hard. But I'm old now, so I can't handle it anymore. So that's another thing. Yeah. And I have to be responsible for a lot of things. So
the day job Jenny got was for the food media company Bon Appetit. She was still working as an executive chef, but it was a more corporate, structured 9-to-5 environment, which meant paid time off for the first time in her life.
And so I took a 2-week trip to Vietnam with my parents. And it was my first time going. And they had been back one other time since they fled. And I went there and it changed everything. It changed how I saw myself. It changed how I saw myself in the world. It changed how I felt about working, and what it meant to work, what community means, what happiness means, and like the American way and the Vietnamese way, and my identity with those two things.
I asked, too, for more insight into Vietnamese culture.
It's more of a very close because so many people in the population are huge, and they kind of helping each other, and they're very organic. Not so much waste like we have here, For example, the utensils are coming from bamboo and bowl and stuff that it's very earthy. And then they have farm where they go grocery every day and buy fresh, fresh vegetable, fresh fish, where you can see the fish swimming in a bowl alive. And then you pick the fish, you'll say, oh, I like that one. So they will take it and they clean it right for you, and then you take it home and cook. So it's a cultural difference. And the food are almost fresh because it's the cheapest way of living. Over there is a lot of farm and rice field.
While Jenny certainly appreciated the food, she was more impacted by the sense of community there.
People, they slept at home, but everything else they did was out on the streets. Everything. They lived everything out on the streets. I feel like while we were there for 2 weeks, I saw a funeral, a wedding, a birthday, like a baby shower, a baptism. Everything was happening out in the public, and just the way people shared everything. They shared, people like openly cried or like wailed. Like here, I feel like everybody's like, if you're at a funeral, you're like stifling, you're crying. And over there, they just like, you would hear it. You'd be across the street having a coffee and you would see it happening. And so it's like this shared experience. Like people, it felt like they had nothing and everything all at the same time. And I feel like in the US, people feel alone a lot, even though they surround themselves with all the things. But I couldn't unsee it. And I wanted that for me. I wasn't sure how I was going to get it, but I wanted to create that somehow for myself.
After the trip, returning to her corporate 9-to-5 just didn't feel right.
There was a lot that happened during those 2 weeks. And I knew coming back that I would make some dramatic changes in my life, but I didn't have a plan. And so I came back and I put in my notice at work. Yeah, and that's why I quit.
Jenny left Bon Appetit in 2016. She would spend the next 5 or so years at home picking up odd jobs and thinking about her next move. Meanwhile, a lot was happening in the world of women's sports.
Today, 5 of America's top athletes filed a federal complaint charging that soccer pays women a pittance to win world championships, while it pays big to the men who lose them.
The U.S. women's soccer team had just won the World Cup in 2015, their third win since the 90s. Then, in March of 2016, 5 members of the U.S. national women's soccer team filed a federal equal pay complaint.
They explained they were paid nearly 4 times less than their male counterparts, while bringing in nearly $20 million more in revenue last year.
That's despite drawing crowds of similar size and racking up unprecedented achievements, like their 3rd World Cup trophy last summer and back-to-back-to-back Olympic gold medals.
Basically, even though the women's team generates more revenue for the U.S. Soccer Federation, and the men's team has literally never won a World Cup, the women's players were still earning significantly less than the men on pretty much every level. And then,
they're in trouble again here. Rapinoe has won it.
The 2019 Women's World Cup.
And she has.
Which is categorically considered one of the biggest hockey stick moments for the women's sports industry sector in the last umpteen years.
This is Jen Barnes again.
It was the most watched Women's World Cup of all time. And as you were watching the Women's World Cup in 2019, there were, stadiums in Europe were filling up with fans waving signs, equal pay, equal play.
Equal pay, equal pay, equal pay.
And I don't know if you know the term LFG, stands for Let's Go. So that was a term that was coined on the field by the USWNT players. And then it became this rallying cry for women's equality in sports. Pay equality, gender equality issues that go beyond that. And all of those things elevated women's sports and the play. Like, the play was incredible.
And they are the world champions again.
The games were beautiful to watch. They got a lot more publicity. They had millions of people watching them all over the world and many more people attending the Women's World Cup. So in that moment, it expanded the coverage, right? And the watching base all over the world. And so that really did shift a lot. Immediately after that, that team sued for equal pay and equal play time and equal protections. And Megan Rapinoe and a number of the players who were on the U.S. national team or still are, and they were successful in that bid for equality.
And then it was 2020.
The women's sports industry sector was perfectly situated to take advantage of what happened during COVID when we were all sitting at home in front of TV screens and laptop screens and phone screens. Because for a very long time, linear cable, so the stuff that when you turn on the TV, the cable that you get that way, was not programming women's sports. Most women's sports was only accessible through paywalls on various streaming platforms or websites. And so when we were all at home for 2.5, 3 years during COVID, what were we doing? We were watching way too much TV and streaming a whole bunch of content. And as we were sitting at home watching more women's sports because we were in front of the right kinds of platforms where they were being played, there was an explosion.
Have you heard of Olivia, the travel company for lesbians and LGBTQ plus women? You know what they say. Wherever you go, there you are. And when you're a lesbian or LGBTQ plus woman, you want to go on vacation, let your hair down, and be your unique self. Olivia Travel creates full takeovers of their cruise, resort, riverboat, and adventure vacations. So you'll spend the week with LGBTQ plus women who come from all different backgrounds yet have so much in common. It's life-changing to be in the majority on your vacation. You don't know until you go. Discover Olivia for yourself at olivia.com or through the link in our show notes. Save $100 on your next Olivia booking with promo code CRUISING. As women's sports viewership exploded, Jenny was on a journey of her own. She had first jokingly conceptualized the sports bra back in 2018, but by 2020, Jenny was already a devout women's sports fan. And like a lot of us, she had other things on her mind.
The rug kind of got pulled out from under everybody. And it kind of really forced me, and I feel like it forced a lot of people, like millions and millions of people, to reevaluate their priorities, where their life was, where the world was going, their role in the world. In 2020, all this stuff started happening and social movements were happening, like the murder of George Floyd, the murder of Breonna Taylor, and the Me Too movement was in the thick of things. There was all of this stuff going on. And I started to get really frustrated with how I wasn't contributing anything positive. So I started cooking in the kitchens downtown for homeless youth. We did some food delivery stuff, like food boxes. We volunteered a bunch. donated whatever we could. And it just felt like these little pieces of things that helped us feel like we were contributing, but it didn't feel like enough. And so I just grew more and more frustrated being quote unquote unemployed this whole time. And so I was kind of like getting, I don't know about depressed, but like pissed off at myself. And I was like, what can I do? I was like racking my brain. I was like, I feel like I have something to offer, but I don't know what it is. And like my only experience, my career had been cooking. So I thought about like traveling the world and cooking in disaster relief areas or something like that. And then my girlfriend at the time, she was just like, hey, you know how we always joke about the sports bra? I was like, yeah. And she goes, why don't you do that? Like out of the blue. I literally like laughed in her face. I was like, I don't understand how something like that could make any kind of a difference. Because in my mind, at least, it had only been a joke, a place for my friends and I to hang out and watch games. That was it.
Besides, Jenny had never wanted to own a bar or restaurant.
When I was a chef, people asked me all the time, Jenny, when are you going to open a restaurant? I'd be like, hell no, never. Like literally never. Like I don't love anything that much to work that hard. To like sacrifice my free time, like no way. Yeah.
But somehow, by the spring of 2021,
the idea of the sports bra was like my girlfriend put the seed in. And then it just, within months, I think, I was like completely obsessed with at least the possibility of doing it. So I started to like do a little research and I was like, I wonder, how successful it's been in other places. I like looked and I tried to Google like different combinations of words, all the different things. I couldn't find a single thing, not one. I did find like a couple pop-ups, one in DC and then like one in London that I think they had planned it, but never got off the ground. Other than that, there was nothing else out there.
Not a single women's sports bar anywhere in the world. And
so I was like, scared because I was like, oh, why not? But it got to the point where it was all I can think about. I woke up thinking about it. I went to bed thinking about it. So in July, I had my first meeting with a mentor of mine. He was the first like professional person that I talked to.
At the time, this mentor was involved in running over a dozen restaurants in Portland, some of them sports bars.
So we sit down, we have like some light chit chat, and he's like, lay it on me. And I tell him, I'm just like, I'm thinking about opening a women's sports bar, a bar that only plays women's sports. And he looked at me and he goes, what's your timeline? And I go, a year and a half, 2 years? And he goes, no. He goes, you need to do it right now. And he's like a bro, you know what I mean? Like a bro. And he's also like really a straight shooter. He won't blow smoke up your ass. He will just tell you the way it is. And he said that one of the sports bars he ran would do like a Thorns night.
The Thorns are Portland's women's soccer team.
And they would sell out in like 5 minutes, or like the door would have to close. It would be absolutely packed. And he was basically like, you need to do it right now. Like, don't wait. So I was shocked to hear him say that.
Jenny's mentor had full confidence in the sports bra concept. But in the investment world, Jenny didn't find as much support.
I got denied by every traditional lender, including 3 big banks and 2 SBA loans. And all of them had the same reason, which was 3 main things. One is that we were in the thick of the pandemic. The Delta variant had just come out. 2, it's a bar and restaurant, and they were closing like dozens every day. And, all the funds were trying to go to keep these things alive, let alone open a new one. And the third reason was that I had never done anything like this before. It was my first business, and no one had ever done anything like this before. So a concept that had never been tried. So it's very high risk. But every single person I spoke to, as far as a bank or lender or anybody, they were like, this is a great idea. Like, we love it. But literally, you can't get us to write a check for it. And literally, no, but I'm sorry. So I immediately started asking friends and family, and it was basically begging for checks and money. So I had, friends and family that reached into their pocketbooks, and then I drained my savings account, and I started looking for a spot. And December, I think this was like the 4th place that I looked at. And as soon as I walked through the doors, I could see where everything was going to be. And that feeling of just knowing, I was like, I'm going to sign the lease. And I think I had enough money to maybe like last for maybe 2 months with what I had from my bank account and from friends and family. And so I signed the lease, And once I signed it, I decided to launch a Kickstarter.
Because 2 months of funding is not enough of a cushion to get a bar and restaurant up and running.
I knew I needed $48,000 to make it to 5 months, I think, to make my budget to 5 months. And that was me being really frugal. And then hope that I could get some other kind of loan in the meantime. But when I looked at Kickstarter and I looked at other Portland restaurants and what they were asking for at that time, it was anywhere between like $3,000. And I think the most I saw was $12,000. And so I was like, oh my God, am I going to ask strangers for $48,000? No way. And so I told my girlfriend, I was like, I'm going to ask for 30. Like 30 sounds like an okay number to ask strangers for. And she goes, what are you going to do with the $18,000 that you need? And I was like, I'll figure it out. You know, I can beg somebody else. And then she gave me a piece of advice that I will hold on to forever, which is you should just ask for what you need. And, you know, with Kickstarter, you get all or nothing. So if you don't meet your goal, you don't get anything. And that was my biggest fear, was that I would ask too much and we'd get to like $26,000 by the end and I wouldn't get anything and I would be up a creek. So she talked me into it. And so I asked for $48,000, which is a lot of money. And then the first day, I think I got like $2,000, which was great. I was like, okay, if we get $2,000 every day, we're going to make it, because I had it open for 30 days. Second day, it was like another $1,200. And when I looked at the names, it was like all people I recognized, like $25 from, you know, this girl I used to play basketball with 3 years ago or whatever. And I was like, okay, this can happen. This can happen. And so on day 3 of the Kickstarter, I was in here working by myself and I get a phone call, and it's Brooke from Eater PDX, which is an online magazine, food magazine. I'm a big fan of Eater. So she was like, hey, this is Brooke. I was like, oh my God, I know who you are. Like, you're the editor or whatever. I guess they have a ping whenever a new bar or restaurant asks for a liquor license. So she got a ping that somebody on Broadway called the Sports Bra is asking for a liquor license. And she was like, there's a mistake here. Like, there's something wrong. So she was like, is it supposed to be the sports bar? Like, I don't understand. And so I gave her the spiel and she was fascinated. And she goes, you know, I think we're going to try to write this story today. And I was like, okay. So I get back to work, and like 2 hours later, my mom texts me. She goes, Jenny, have you looked at the Kickstarter? And I go, no. And she goes, look at your Kickstarter. And I look at it, and, you know, there's a graph for like day 1. It's like day 1. And then, you know, 48,000 is like this line. So you get like 1,000 is like up like this. Day 1, day 2. And then just now, it was like a straight up and down line. And I go, oh my God. And then right then, as I'm looking at it, Brooke texts me and she goes, we just published the article. And then like immediately my phone starts going off and it's like KGW and like the Oregonian. And I was like, oh my God.
Word spread quickly about the sports bra and their Kickstarter.
I reached the 48K by day 9. It was bonkers. It was bonkers. And then by the end of it, we had more than double what we needed.
As we've already kind of gotten into, and as Jenny wholly expected, her parents were initially against the idea of the sports bra.
That was hard. That was hard for me to not have like my parents be behind it. And every day they were like trying to talk me out of it. And it got to the point where I was like, I signed the lease and I was like, listen, I love you guys, but literally nothing you can say or do will change my mind. And like after that, they started to come in, they would help. And they'd be like, well, we'll see how this goes.
Until the Eater PDX article dropped.
After the Kickstarter happened, like the skyrocketing, they completely 180'd because their fear was becoming alleviated by all the positive reinforcement we were getting.
Just the support that she got, it's incredible that I don't worry about anything anymore. At first, it was very scary. Because it's such a huge movement. And I didn't really realize that she has any support, you know, beside us. But it turned out that it's very overwhelming, and which I'm so thankful for that.
The success of the Kickstarter was a turning point in many ways.
Since that moment, we haven't looked back. Like, it's been media, it's been support from across the globe, really. But the Kickstarter, I was getting comments and letters and emails from people from all over the country. There were people who wanted to donate money from like Belgium and Australia, but they couldn't because of whatever Kickstarter rules are. So it was nuts. But a lot of it was just people being like, thank you for being brave. Thank you for doing this. And people like saying that they had a daughter that played sports and how much this means to them. People who were in their 70s and played sports before Title IX and how they didn't think that in their lifetime they would see something like this. Or people who said they couldn't believe that something like this didn't already exist and why. Like men said that it had never occurred to them going to sports bars, that was missing because it's not their lived experience, right? And so like they were like, now I can't unsee it.
It was clear that people were excited about the sports bra. More people than Jenny had ever expected.
I wasn't sure, like my friends and family love the idea, but you never really know how your idea will land in the general sphere of the world. And, what's wild is that I thought that I was filling like a small niche, like a wedge of women's sports fans. And it turns out like a space like this is actually, it's very intersectional in who it's impacting and who it resonates with for all different reasons.
The sports bra officially opened on April 1st, 2022.
The first month or so we were open, we were so busy, like chaos. It was slam packed. We'd open to a line and we would shut the door on a line. And like the wait was like 2 hours, like constantly.
The bar is decorated almost entirely with sports memorabilia. Jerseys, flags, and scarves, signed soccer balls and baseballs and footballs, shelves of trophies and medals, a pair of boxing gloves, a snowboard, figure skates. The list goes on.
The decor in here, I want to say like 90% of it is donated. And like the stuff that's donated, half of it at least have a story that is extremely powerful. Then there's been, I couldn't tell you, like hundreds of stories that have been very emotional for me.
Up on the wall next to us is a frame containing a scarf and a set of wooden drumsticks.
This piece right here is probably one of the more notable because it happened right at the beginning. So I remember this story really well. On our Kickstarter, we had like a major, like the grand donation, which was like the most, it was like $5,500 or something that you could donate. And this person donated that amount. And he wrote me an email and he goes, my wife and I are gigantic sports fans, women's sports fans. They love the Portland Thorns. They went to every single game. He made some joke about like how his wife always wanted to open a women's sports bar and how she would have named it like something totally inappropriate to be funny. I think it was like the clitoris and then like none of the men could find it or something like that. And he like made this long, funny story and this funny joke. And like right after the joke, like I'm reading the email and I'm laughing. And he goes, she died 2 years ago. She was 41 and she died from cancer. And he said that if she had been alive, they would have donated separately so that they could donate, $5,500 each. And he said that you would have had her banging on your door to volunteer to work for free. And he just went on and on about how he wished that she could have seen that. I went from like laughing to absolute breakdown in tears. And so I wrote him back. I took a while to write him back because I wanted to really respect, what he was putting out there. And I asked him to come and visit me here. And, we were still under construction, all that stuff. But he came in and he brought a bunch of stuff with him that belonged to her. And so this scarf he had custom made for her in Germany. And no kindergarten, I guess, is a phrase that our goalie had said back in the day. And so he brought it in, had it made, and then brought it in, had it signed by the goalie. And it hung behind her office for like 7 years, behind her office chair. And so he wanted it to be hung here. And then the drumsticks, so they played the big drums at the games, at the Thorns games, they played the huge drums. And he said that the game after she died, he went and people were like, are you sure you want to be here? And he's like, she would want me to be here. And I guess he played so hard that he broke the drumstick. So like this one is broken. And so he brought those in. And it was just a lot for me. And I think at that moment I realized that that this was going to be something special. And so I had it custom framed, and it's here now. And he has her favorite saying on there, and it's dedicated to her, basically. It says, "Raise a glass and cheer in loving memory of Laura Guillotte, Rose City till she died, 1977 to 2021. And in quotes, it says, "I told you I could fly because we all have wings, but some of us don't know why." What's kind of cool is that for a few of the Thorns games, I saw him bringing in a date, and they would like hold hands at the bar and like watch games. And I was like, okay, like life goes on. But this will be here forever.
Some of Jenny's own memorabilia is displayed around the bar as well.
So when I put up the trophy shelf, I knew I wanted to have it covered in trophies because I thought it'd be cool. And I was just like, I want like the really chintzy trophies that everybody keeps in like their garage for like 30 years. And I had like 3. So I have my trophies are up there. One of them is from when I played basketball for the Y when I was like little. And then one of them was the most recent trophy I got, which was I was coaching a team of 5th and 6th graders, and we had won. And so I put that trophy up there. And so I put like a little post on Instagram about these chintzy trophies that I wanted to put on the shelf. And it started out with boxes of people bringing like these trophies. And then it ended up with people like bringing real trophies, like meaningful trophies. And I was like, okay, I just want you to know that if a fire consumes this place, I can't replace this. Like, this is irreplaceable. And like, I might, move and take it with me and like lose your contact. And they were like, fine. I was like, okay. So some of the trophies are like legitimate, like very meaningful trophies to people. And they just wanted it to be displayed here.
And the outpouring of support for the bar has not waned.
To this day, I still get people wanting to donate money to me. And I'm like, oh no, we're not taking donations. Like a woman literally like a couple weeks ago was just like, I love what you're doing. Can I donate money to you? And I was like, no, but you can buy some merch or whatever. And she was like, how about I buy a gift card and you give it to a random stranger? Yeah, I was like, great. So she did it. She bought like a gift card and I gave it to a random stranger.
The popularity of the sports bra has really pulled out of the shadows this huge untapped market of women's sports fans.
Not showing women's sports on your screens, if you are a place that has TV screens that show sports, is a mistake. It is an absolute loss of revenue.
Not long after Sports Bra opened in April of 2022, more of these women-focused sports bars started popping up around the country. There's Jen Barnes' bar, Rough and Tumble in Seattle, and another called Whiskey Girl in Chicago. They both opened later that year in 2022, but the timing is completely coincidental. Here's Jen Barnes.
In fact, I didn't know about the sports bra until it hit kind of the major airwaves in March of 2022. So I was very far into my business plan, funding, searching for the location. So I'd already been working on the Rough and Tumble for quite a while.
All 3 of these bars were conceptualized and planned without really knowing about the others.
I was just done with not being able to watch women's sports. It's a constant issue.
As we've been saying, it's a common experience.
I can't tell you the number of times we've asked for the WNBA game.
This is Christina Roberts. She owns Whiskey Girl Tavern with her wife, Heather.
They don't care. They'll be like, yeah, whatever, we're going to put on this game. And it's overlooked. And nobody seems to appreciate how important women's sports is. We just feel like that's a big missing piece.
It doesn't seem like there's any sort of tension between these bars with very similar concepts. Quite the opposite, actually.
Literally the first 3 things I did, I was like, I hit publish on the website, the socials, and emailed Jenny and introduced myself. And I was so excited to talk with her. And I wanted her to know that she had a sister not too far north and, the 2 Jens.
When we visited the sports bra, Jenny had just gotten back from a trip to Seattle because Jen Barnes had invited her to the opening of Rough and Tumble.
I wanted her to be there. I felt like it was so important to share this experience with this sister, truly, in what was at the moment the only other person in the world who was doing anything like it.
And Jenny, sports bra Jenny, gifted Rough and Tumble its first piece of sports memorabilia,
which was a Lauren Jackson jersey. Lauren Jackson is now retired from the Seattle Storm, but used to be one of our top players. And somebody had sent her game-worn jersey to Jenny. We don't Jenny's positive that it's actually Lauren Jackson who sent it, but we don't know for sure. Anyway, she had that framed and gave it to me, and I cried and she cried.
Aside from the fact that Sports Bra opened earliest and will therefore always hold the title of the first women's sports bar, there's another big thing that sets Jenny's bar apart. At Rough and Tumble and Whiskey Girl, while their main focus is creating space for women's sports fans, they're not exclusive about it. If there's a men's game happening, you can probably catch the men's game. But this is not the case at the Sports Bra.
Can you explain to me what happens when people want to play men's sports? What's like the protocol?
I mean, we just say, sorry, we don't play men's sports here, just women.
This is Sadee, the Sports Bra bar manager.
A lot of times people will call and be like, do you play the Oregon State game? I'm like, only if it's women's, you know? Like, yeah, you really can't. Like, it's just like, what would we be? It's the whole like vision of this place is for women's sports. So like, it just completely defeats the purpose if we put men's sports on here. We might do like some co-ed stuff and every now and then, but if there's not women's sports playing, it's Jane Fonda workout. It's a dog show. Like, we're definitely not doing men's sports here.
Do you get that a lot?
I would say every day for sure.
The Sports Bra might be strict about what plays on their TVs, but they're not strict about who watches it.
We have people with families and their husbands coming in. Everybody's watching.
Minors are allowed at the bar until 10 p.m. And this is something that's really important to Jenny.
I started to think about, if I was a kid and I had a space like this and my parents took me here, how much of a difference that would have made in my life. And that to me is like one of the biggest things about the Sports Bra that I love is the ability to have young folks in here to see representation on TV and just like what they can be and like almost normalize girls and women in sports. Because so many young girls drop out of sports thinking that there's no future for them in it. And then I started to do research, on how girls that play sports, there's just like dramatic benefits like throughout their life, all the way through and through, from increased self-esteem to like lower rates of drug use or suicide, or, I think something like 88% of CEOs in the Fortune 500 that are women played sports. It's a win-win situation. Like, why wouldn't we want our girls to be exposed to that and like play sports? I'll never forget there was one time there was a dad in here with 2 daughters and we had gymnastics on. I was walking through and like just talking to people, making sure everybody's food was okay. And I remember these 2 girls were just like, they didn't blink. They were just staring at the TV. And I walked by and the dad like taps me on the arm and like with tears in his eyes, he just thanked me for creating a space where his daughters can see their future on TV. Like, he said that.
And the Sports Bra has become quite the family affair for Jenny as well.
Yes, I try to come in every day. Yeah, we just think that with Jenny and her mission and the love that she gave it to community, we feel that our help is to support her mission, and we feel very good. And we don't think much about anything except to help smoothing things in operation. So I'm glad that I keep myself busy because I'm retired, so I'm happy to help out.
Though at first, Jenny tried to keep her parents away from the bar.
I'm used to having parents that are like all up in my business. And like, this was finally my thing, like 100% mine. And so I was very protective of the space. I was like, you guys need to get out of here, like stay away. And eventually she just like weaseled her way in. And so we get fresh bread delivery all the time. And so my mom's first job was to like rotate the bread. So she would rotate first in, first out bread to make sure like the cooks knew which bread to grab first and which one to grab last, and like make sure like, everything's in the right order. And then my mom used to be a bank teller when I was growing up. She worked at like C First Bank or whatever. And so she's really good with money. And so mom would count out the till. And she would also run to the bank to break denominations, like hundreds down to 20s and ones or whatever it was. And so I gave her like a list of the breakdown, and she would do that once a week. And then the tips situation, like tipping everybody out, is kind of complicated. And so I made a spreadsheet, and I fill out the spreadsheet every day, and then I hand it to her, and then she divides the tips out every day. So she handles like tipping. She runs to the bank for me. She also makes breakfast for me. We spend 2-3 hours here every day together, which is more than we've ever spent together.
Sometimes it is hard on her because, I want to know everything she's doing. But she keep me in boundary, so so that's okay.
Sometimes it's really hard because she's a mom still. She'd be like, I have this idea. I'm like, I don't want to hear it. Because the ideas are like totally ridiculous.
Like what?
Oh my gosh. We have a couple of items on the menu that pay homage to, what I grew up eating, including one of her recipes is on there. So mom wants to make like more Vietnamese food here. And I was like, no, mom, like, do you know how labor intensive that is? Blah, 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 all the reasons why. And she was like, you should have a rice cooker here. I'm like, okay, no.
But at the end of the day, Jenny appreciates her mom's involvement, as does everyone else at the Sports Bra.
She's also become like the restaurant mom. And so one day she asked me for everybody's birthdays. And then if they have kids, all of their birthdays too. And so she went from having one child to like 20 children. And everyone and their children, like a grandma. Yeah. So, so everybody here calls her mom. Everybody calls my dad.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know where that comes from, but we get used to it, and yeah, we love it. Yeah, yeah.
I have never seen my mom happier, never in my entire life.
And why wouldn't she be? Her only child is not just successful and stable; she's literally changing the world. And Thu could not be more proud.
Me and my husband, we are very fortunate that we have Jenny, that we can ride the wave with her. We just behind her and just support whatever she needs us to do. But she does not need us. She do whatever she feel that she need to do. I step in the back. Yeah, I told my husband, I said, we are fading in the back. It's her time. She know what to do, and she has a community that's supporting her. So much courage that I don't know where she got that from. She doesn't get that from me or her dad. I couldn't believe it either. Yeah, I sometimes it's like a dream to me. I feel like, what did I do right? What did I do to have a daughter like Jenny? I mean, I have a little influence on her, but what she have created in the community is all her. I am just overwhelmed with emotion, and I don't speak English very well, so I keep it to myself. But yeah, proud is understatement.
Sometimes when it's full in here and like things are rocking, I walk through here and it reminds me of when I was like walking through the markets in Vietnam, like food markets, where everybody's talking. There's laughter. There's like unexpected moments. There's people of all walks sharing an experience together. And that feeling is the same. And that's what I loved about being in Vietnam, and to be able to create something like that here for myself and for my community. I think that's like the most rewarding part of everything.
Cruising is independently reported and produced by a small but mighty team of 3. Story producer and social media manager Rachel Karp, line producer and resident road trip driver Jen McGinnity, and story producer and audio engineer me, Sarah Gabrielli. Our theme song is by Joey Freeman. Thank you to our sponsors, Olivia Travel and Honda. You can find us at our website, cruisingpod.com, on social media @cruisingpod, and at patreon.com/cruisingpod. Listen to Cruising wherever you get your podcasts.